Knows me. For those of you that don't, my name's Mike Phillips. I'm one of the assistant instructors here with the shop, with Randy's. So I've been diving for 20 years and been with these guys for a long time. Not my assistant a couple of years ago. I worked with him for a couple of years and in 2021 became the assistant. So Kai said, "You're doing a talk." I said, "Okay." And he said, "What are you doing now?" And I said, "I don't know." And I thought, "Oh, I know. One thing that, not so much for the students, but more for the new divers who have just started diving. Everybody is paranoid about their air consumption. Whether they're diving too much and they think they're going through it too fast. And you get taught a little bit about it in the books, but it doesn't really tell you the real secrets about what's going on. So we're going to cover some of that today and hopefully give folks some pointers and some ideas on how to get better as they go through. So what affects our air consumption when we're diving? For those of you that are certified, the big one obviously is depth. You're not getting around that. You need to dive a certain depth. Whatever depth you're diving at is going to affect your air. We'll go through each one of these in detail. And there's another couple of things, and this is where the texts don't really spread it out the way they should do. The amount of air that you'll use is based on your resting effort, your trim and your buoyancy in the water, then your exertion effort for any thing you're actually swimming around. So depth is the easy one to go through. You pick up your books, every time you go down an atmosphere, 33 feet, seawater, 34 feet. Freshwater is another atmosphere. So if you go down to 33 feet, you're burning twice as much air as you are at the surface. You go down 66 feet, you're burning 3 times, go down 100 feet, you're burning 4 times as much air for the same effort as you are at the surface. That's just straight physics, you can't do anything about that. What you can do though, is the resting effort. And this is the one that books don't go into. And this is the big one. This is the amount of effort. So what I've defined it as the amount of effort you need if you were just in the water doing absolutely nothing. So on a perfect day, it's affected by a few things. Temperature affects it a lot. Discomfort, and then the big one that I've underlined is stress. And stress is actually what causes all of everybody to burn too much air. And what you've got is a couple of charts here. It might not be so easy. These are 2 of my dives from Cozumel. So this one up here was a nice comfortable dive. My sac rate was 0.35 cubic feet a minute. One down there was 0.4. So we're in Cozumel, water's the same, temperature's beautiful, but I used far more air on this dive than I did on that dive. And the reason was because I was more stressed on this dive. So this dive was an afternoon dive. It was one of the dives I did first time with the group because I drove with all you guys in the morning. I went over with somebody else in the afternoon. So it's the first time I dove with this group in the afternoon, and I started off, my tank had 2800, didn't have 3000 in it. The dive master was this guy that must have been about 120 pounds dripping wet. The other guys that I was driving with, they were a group that had all been diving together. 3 of them were women. You can tell they were all very, very good divers. So now my stress is already up there because I'm thinking, what am I expected to do? And they say, "Hey, how good are you?" I say, "Yeah, I'm good on air, I'm good to go." So we jump in and we do the dive, and it's a deep dive. We went down 90 feet. My average depth, I think, was 60 feet over an hour for that dive. So that was a deep dive on that one. And we burnt through some more, and it's hard to see on here, but the reason I put these up is because these are off of the watch, and the watch gives me my heart rate. So my average heart rate on the one where I burnt less air, you can't actually really see it on there. My average heart rate was 61 beats a minute on that one. Now my resting heart rate is 50. It's low as it is anyway. The one where I was stressed, my average heart rate was 82. And that's why I burnt more air. I didn't do any more effort. They were both really, really slow dives, very slow dives. The fact that it was deeper doesn't matter. Both very warm. In fact, the deeper one was possibly easier because we were on Kanatar Cave, so we're out the current. So very, very slow dives, and it was just the extra stress rose my heart rate a little bit more, and that's why I burnt more air. And if you do the math, it's actually about 12% more air I burnt on that deeper dive. So that's the big one. I wake up like that. My thumbs don't want to work. There we go. So what we've got for those 2 dives, the other thing that affects it is temperature. So this is that same dive, and those of you who've got subsurface will recognise the plot. It's hard to see, it's a shame it's come up pretty crappy on here, because what you can't see is there's actually a line through the middle that shows you the air consumption. That's really annoying that it didn't come up clean. And this was nice and warm, 80 something degrees all the way across, and what you can't see on the line, which is a shame, is the line is dead level. It just goes down level all the way across from the start of the dive to the end of the dive. The air consumption is just constant all the way through. What I have is a cold water dive, and this is Gilboa. So this was, I think this was a deep dive cert class. So we dropped down to, I think that's 98 feet. And this one, I was actually 0.5 for the entire dive. So I used 25% more air comparatively on this dive, and it's purely because of the cold weather. So because of the cold, you can see at this beginning here, so it's tough to see, but the air consumption actually goes red. And that's when we're dropping down, it's because I've got my dry suit on. So I'm filling my BC, I'm filling my dry suit, and body's getting shocked with the cold. So the extra, and it's an easy dive, I've done this dive a ton of times. We go down, we go over to the platform on the other end, we drop down the edge, we go down to Lost World, and everybody gets their deep dive at Lost World, and then we come back up the road, past the tree, and up to the bus and everything. So I've done the dive, I know the dive really, really well, and the extra air consumption was just to stay warm. And that's with my dry suit, with my thermals, with everything else. And it was just a really nice example of the how temperature will affect the different dives that you can do. So don't expect to use the same amount of air when you're diving in the warm as you are when you're diving cold. And again, it's that stress, it's raising your heart rate to keep you warm, it's going to burn more oxygen in your body. So the other one, they say it's trim and buoyancy affects you too, but not for the reasons that you think. Streamlining helps a little bit, weighting and control. It's less those facts themselves, but the fact that you're faffing around with it throughout the entire dive. So again, all the while you're pumping a little bit of air in, a little bit of air out, that amount of air is actually insignificant. It's the fact you're overthinking about it. So again, you get that stress levels going up, your heart rate's going up, you're overthinking everything else that you're doing. And that's what happens when you first get certified as a diver. This is one of the big things. So you're onto a loser when you start because you're stressed out about your air consumption, so your air consumption is worse because you're stressed out about your air consumption. So, but if you can get your trim and your buoyancy perfect, so say when we're in Cozumel, I fall down the bottom of the ocean, put just a tiny little squirt of air in the BC to offset the 6 pound of air in the tank that we start off with, and then throughout the dive I just let it out. Because we were all fair, we weren't doing this on all any of the dives, and I was just adjusting the rest of the stuff in my lungs as we were diving along. And I was going super slow, it was perfectly weighted, and that's where we just get the consistency of really consistent and not over top air use as we go through. So if you can work on your streamlining, work on your weight, and work on your buoyancy, it all works towards the stress. So the other thing that does actually affect air consumption, but not as much as you think, is the exertion effort. So this is if you're swimming around like a whirly dervish. So you jump in the water, especially on the first dive, new resort, new tanks, whatever, you can't get down. Either you've got too excited, you've overinflated your lungs, you're not weighted properly, so then you swim down to try and get to everybody else. You just burn 1,000 PSI swimming down 50 feet. And that's the exertion effort. What we try and do is make this as small as we possibly can. The best divers are lazy divers. And you're really, really lazy. There's no rush to get from here to there. You can take your time, and you'd be surprised if you just fin and glide. And even when we were down in Cozumel, in the current, I mean, I was with one group, not you guys, because you guys didn't see it, and they were hunting for a seahorse. And they found it in the end. It was in a garden area. I didn't really care, but I didn't want to lose the group. So I just faced into the current, and I was doing a slow frog kick. Every 5 or 6 seconds, just do a slow frog kick, just to stay dead still in the current. And I was looking over and it's like the people are going like this, messing around the current, just get low, frog kick, absolute minimum amount of effort. So the other thing that you can work on this, you've got your finning techniques, maintaining position as in your vertical position in the water column, no up and down, moving around a lot, because that's going to take more effort with your changing depth. And I put scuba drills down there because it's just getting familiar with scuba drills. So the easier they are to do, the more second nature they become. You don't think about them, you don't rush them. One thing you often see is people try and rush their drills. They've got to rush, they have to rush to this, all the time in the world. Just take your time and work your way through. So those are what I put down as the 3 main factors that will affect your air consumption. Depth, well 4 actually. Depth you can't do anything about, realistically, is what the dive's going to be. Resting effort is the one you can really improve. The trim you can do, and the exertion one, you just keep it to minimum. Some dives are exertion dives. That's good, but you're going to burn through some air. That's all you're going to have for those. All right, so the other thing the books tend to do, so now we've got some ideas of what's going on. So now you're going to turn around and say, well, how do I get better? If you want to get better. So if you want to get better, you need to be able to measure how you are to start off with. Now, if you're really lucky, you have the computer does it all for you. If you look at all the texts, they make this way, way too complicated. The formulas are +1 this, -1 that, mess around with this, add 33 minus 34, divide by the phase of the moon, and away you go. And it really is quite simple if you get down to it. There's a couple of ways of measuring it. One is, ends up being tank independent, but you need to know the tank size to calculate it. And that's the one that will give you, which is one you normally do at the end of the dive. You put it on the computer and it works it out and says what your cubic feet per minute was. It's pretty hard to measure that one when you're under the water though. So then what all the computers do is they do the second one, which is sac rate, which is just basically the equivalent PSI usage per minute when you're underwater. That one is tank dependent, but I've actually put down the bottom for the different tank sizes, the PSI per cubic feet isn't as big a difference as you'd think. So like for an aluminum 3000, it's 37.5 PSI per cubic feet. For aluminum 100s, like the ones we had down at Cosmo, it's 30. It's easy math. For the steel 100s, like a few of us have got, it's 34.4. And the 72 steels that we use in the class, actually 72s at 2620, not 72s at 2400. So they're 36.4. So it's all pretty much the same. So if you've got a computer or you're just looking at your gauge and you're saying I'm using 15 PSI per minute, whatever it works out at, the tank size doesn't really matter. It's a really good way of doing it. But it's actually how the computers will do it. Even on the shear waters, even though you put the tank size in, that has nothing to do with the sac rate calculation at all whatsoever. All it is on the shear waters is tells you on the little graphic how many bars are left. But that's the only thing it uses for. It doesn't use the actual capacity for the math at all whatsoever. So it just uses the PSI that you're going through. What
it
is
uses
really
what you start with and what you end with.
Yeah, but it doesn't care how big the actual tank is.
Yeah, it doesn't
care what
the
it
tank
is.
is.
And of course, the really good one with that is the gas time remaining. That's even more important than SAC, because that's a better one. So the easy way to do the math is you figure out how many atmospheres you are at the depth that you're at. You figure out PSI you're using per minute, and you just divide by the number of atmospheres. So my example there, which is pretty hard to see, if you're at 50 feet, which is what, 2.5 atmospheres, just about, whatever I did the math to make it 2.5 atmospheres. Yeah, it's 2.5 atmospheres. Because you have to, this is where the books get crazy, because the book will say, oh, 50 feet is 1.5 atmospheres, and you have to add one for the surface air and do this, that, and the others, and just go, it's 2.5. And this one example, they're using 500 PSI in 10 minutes. You divide the 500 by 2.5, and that gets you, and now actually, you figure out one from the 80 cubic feet one, what you want first, and that's 13 1/3. And the math works for right, figure this out. Aye, stop. Stop. Yeah, because it needs to know. Oh, I can read. Why don't I just read it over here on here where it's really difficult? That'd be far too easy, wouldn't it? Yeah, so you need to figure out for that 500 PSI how much of the tank that actually is. And of course, on a 3000 tank, it's pretty simple. It's 1/6 of the tank. So on an 80, it's 13 1/3 cubic feet on an 80. So we've got the 2.5 atmospheres because we're down 50 feet. We just, to make it a surface equivalent, we just divide it by 2.5, which gives us 5 cubic feet a minute equivalent. And that's how you work it out. But that's most of those you do on the dive afterwards. You don't do it so much when you're going down. The sac rate is the one that's easier to do, and that's just PSI divided by 2.5. So you just say you're working through 200 PSI for 10 minutes, so it's 20 PSI a minute. So that's when you see it on the shear waters and on the computers when you're down the bottom. That's the one it will give you. And because the tank sizes are all pretty much the same, I mean you'll know as you dive your own tanks all the time exactly what's a good number for you and what's a bad number for you, but it is pretty comparable between the tanks. But then you just get a computer that does it for you, don't worry about it, it's all good. So to improve, and this is the holy grail, so everybody to get really, really good, and it's all about staying calm and keeping that rest effort as low as you possibly can. So stay calm, stay warm, easier to said than do. I think a lot of things we see with students is it's easy when we're leading a dive, especially somewhere like a gill bar or somewhere, because we know it inside out and upside down. So there's no, I don't know where I'm going stress. Or what if I get lost, where do I go? If I lose these people, what am I doing? So all these things that are adding to stress. So if you're diving somewhere, if you plan your dive properly and you dive to what your plan is, you've removed that element of stress because you know where you're going. You know, oh, I've gone out this far, I've allowed myself 20 minutes to get back, I've got 1,000 PSI to go, life is good, it's not a problem whatsoever. Be comfortable in your gear is another one, so don't be fiddling with it. Just get something that's comfortable, just get used to it, and you'll lower that stress level again. The big one at the end, don't try to match other divers. Once you can get to the point, most dives, most commercial dives, certainly when we got on the off on the boats and down to the islands and stuff, 45, 50 minutes. You can get to the point where you can do a 45, 50 minute dive with the rest of the group and you come up, who cares if you've got 1,500 left or if you've got 700 left. As long as you don't have 300 left, but as long as you can get to the end of the dive, it's all really good. So what you can do when you're working on that with some other folks is if you are somebody who sucks down a little bit more than other people, stay a little bit shallower. Stay 10 foot less, 10 or 15 foot below. It makes a big difference. I did the math on it. If you're just going from 60 feet to 50 feet, you'll actually burn 13 or 14% less air. Just that 10 foot difference. If everybody else is at 60, and then you go up, you go, well, you've got an extra 5 minutes. And don't panic when you get to the end, because everybody's looking to go, oh, I'm burning loads of air. No, yeah, because you're at 60 feet. You're going to come up at the end, and that 700 PSI at the end is going to last you a long time. You're at 15 foot doing a 3 minute, that air is going to last you a long time. So I say, don't reduce unnecessary movement. Just be lazy. It's the biggest advice I can give everybody underwater. Just be lazy and do whatever you need to do. Don't mess around. And the other one as well, you can speak to every single diver, and every single diver will tell you they perfected how to breathe underwater. And every single one of us does it differently. It all works. Some people breathe in slow on a count, breathe out slow on a count. Me, I take a big breath pretty fast, but then I breathe out pretty slow. Because I find that taking that big breath stops my lungs feeling like I need to get more air into them. And it took me a while to figure that out, but that works for me. Other people, you're not meant to do this. Some people will take a breath, then hold it for a little bit, let a little bit out, hold it for a little bit, let a little bit out. People can experiment and they can find what breathing techniques works for you. But definitely experiment around. Skip breathing is bad. You will get a CO2 headache, and they suck because they last 24 hours and they're really, really bad. I had them. They are horrible. But most of it is, oh, sod off. Why does it snooze it every single time it does it? What does brings all this stuff is just doing more and more and more dives. And what I've found learning to teach was that having to get it perfect to teach the students means that when I'm diving, I'm not even thinking about what I'm doing. It's second nature, and I don't rush. There is no rush, so you stay calm, you stay easy, you don't push anything else through. It's really, really easy to do. And that's what you can do, just do more dives. And it's really hard to say to people, don't think about your air consumption, then it'll get better. And unfortunately, I mean, TJ's nodding, or the instructors are not, that's the way it works. If you don't think about it, it will miraculously just, oh, I'm not using any air at all whatsoever. All the way you think about it, that stress level goes up and you go through. Don't try and read this underwater to see your heart rate when you're driving. That's really hard, really, really hard. All right, so that's just about my level of stuff. So then we do questions. What am I drinking? Thank you, buddy. No questions, that was easy.
Go to slide 7.
Which one was 7, TJ?
One
Seven's
number
from the
7.
top.
There, that's it.
That's one, yeah.
All right, so just throwing a little bit of extra something into the mix here.
Mm-hmm.
It's not.
Oh, that guy's got terrible trim, by the way. His hands are hanging down, his fins are up at an angle at the back. It's like he thinks he's the bee's knees, but he's not.
That graphic actually caught my attention because how many times have you been diving where you've seen someone rotated
Yep.
that way?
Yeah.
Okay, so now once you've rotated into that position, you're spending an incredible amount of energy staying at depth.
Pushing.
And what you'll see with a lot of people do, especially newer folks, they're overweighted.
Right.
So, but they've got this fear about putting enough air in their BCs to counteract it. So they're like this, and they're getting used to finning all the time, and the weight's pushing them down, they're finning up. And that's what they think. As soon as they stop finning, they sink like a stone.
Yeah.
Because they've got too much weight on them. They're afraid to actually, the BCs are there for a reason, especially when you dive dry. I've got so much weight on the dry suits just to get through all the pan and get through everything else. You get used to using the air for what it needs to be used for.
I had an epiphany a number of years ago, and we were actually out at Bonne Terre. I don't know if anyone's ever been to Bonne Terre or not. It's a mine out in Missouri. And the nice thing about it is you can go out in the wintertime and dive, and it's, you know, climate controlled because it's a mine, half a mile underground. And there was a chasm that I was watching my group swim across, and most everybody was going across like this, except for one guy. One guy's going across like this. He was the guy that was the air pig of the group. All right, and after watching him do that, we had a little talk afterwards, and I said, I think I know why you're going through so much air. That was exactly why.
And what a lot of people do with their trim is they'll blame it on their gear, and they'll say, oh, I can't get the weights in the right place on the tank, I can't do this, I can't do this, that, and the other. Any one of us will grab any piece of gear, throw it on, and be like this in the water.
Well,
So, I mean, unless it's outrageously off.
Yeah.
So don't get hung up on the fact that, oh, this guy's got tank straps in the wrong place and I'm 3 inches off, and this thing. You can adjust it with your arms, you can adjust with your legs, you can adjust with your breathing, you can change your angles.
but when you're overweighted, you've got the weight around your waist, and you've got the buoyancy in your chest, and that just naturally puts you into that position. And now, if you put enough buoyancy into your BC to stay at that level, then you're going to start swimming up when you start swimming naturally. So you automatically have to have less air in your BC to stay at that depth if you're kicking your ass off.
Yeah, you should only need enough weight to count 6 pounds of air in the tank and whatever your wetsuit squeezes on the way down. So if you've got a 3, it doesn't squeeze at all, especially if you've got a crappy or 3, doesn't do anything. So really, just whatever your natural buoyancy is to sink, then an extra 6 pounds for the tank, and that's about all you really, really need.
Yeah, and and then that ties into a whole lot of other things with streamlining and everything like that, because you've got more air in your BC, you got more air in your dry suit if you're wearing a dry suit.
Yeah.
You're plowing through the water instead of having the water glide over you. So, and I know Mike mentioned during his presentation that that's minimal, but it still adds up, especially when you're kicking your ass off.
And it's more than kicking off, is raising your blood, raising your heart rate, raising your effort,
Exactly.
and you're sucking more air to go over it, and it all contributes to that same thing. So yeah, you watch the people that don't suck in the air, they're the people that are just, even if their trim is fairly crap, but they're just, that guy is probably just frog kicking once every 30 seconds and just floating through.
No.
He's got a back plate and wings, you can see, but his wing's not that inflated. So like with my back plate, it's nice because all the weight is directly over my lungs. So there is nothing else that's messing me about, so just a little bit of weight on the back for the tank.
I think one thing for air consumption too, for especially newer divers, is there's this thought that you have to get in the water and get under the water as fast as you can. And so I know when I started diving, I was doing this. I would get in, it's like, okay, you're ready to go. We get under the water, and then I'm adjusting and fixing and messing and breathing hard because I'm figuring out what I'm doing, instead of doing it at the surface, getting everything set, everything settled, then going under the water. And so that was something that like I figured out. I was like, oh, this is better now.
And that is, it's true with a lot of stuff. The people that fight going down are the people that think they're not going to get down. The people that believe they're going to sink like a stone. And that's what that's where you get the experience. You know you're going to sink. They were laughing. The dive masters were laughing at me in Cozumel because I'm so used to sinking the dry suit and sinking everything else. I just empty my lungs like that. Then you're overweight. I said, no, I'm not. Because when I'm at 500, I'm fighting this thing at 500 with the weight I've got in the back.
Get vertical, dump your BC, dump your lungs, you'll sing like a rock.
Right, exactly. So at the end, I was actually going down slower on purpose and holding air in my lungs, and the dive masters were freaking out and saying I was overweighted when I was down there. So yeah, so if you think you're going to sink, you're going to sink.
I think stress and comfort level are probably the two biggest things. But when you think of the stressness, everything like that, your excitement, okay, you can be excited about something too. I mean, the first time you go out there and you see a school shark, or something like that's gonna get you. Like for me, my one that I use for example all the time is the first time I ever went spearfishing. I had a great air consumption rate, and then on the first dive that I've ever went spearfishing, I probably used air at least twice as fast because I was excited. It wasn't nothing. I wasn't stressed out about anything. I wasn't scared about anything. I was just so excited of doing it, seeing it, trying to do it, chasing a fish. It's makes a huge difference. And to go off of what Kaya said, another way to limit the stress is your dive planning ahead of time. If you have everything ready and set aside, so you're not stressed trying to get everything together, not stressed trying to get into the water, keep up with everybody else. And a lot of that starts the day before. I mean, it sounds silly, but packing your bags in reverse and getting stuff set up so that when you get there, you're organized and you can just put the stuff on, you get right in the water, and you're sitting there. I mean, did you ever see an instructor or somebody just sitting there waiting, like, how'd they get together so quick? I mean, they have twice the amount of gear as I have, and they're done and like that, where you're trying to keep up with them, you're trying to compare yourself to them, where a lot of it's just organizing and being prepared. Before the dive even starts, that makes a huge difference because you're already worked up, your heart rate's up, you're trying to get everything, you're making sure, did you forget anything or not? Where if you have everything organized where you're not forgetting everything and it's all ready where you feel comfortable getting dressed and getting set up, it's going to make you that much more comfortable when you start your dive.
That's it, I tell you, that's it. Take your time, do whatever you want to do, and as Lou said, just do things your own stuff. And if you are looking to improve your air, monitor your dives. Everybody's got your dive computers, using whatever your dive software is. Don't try and match my numbers, they're my numbers. Just do if you're looking for it, you just want to see an improvement in your own, so you get to a place you're comfortable. And saying as long as if you can do the dive, the 50-minute dive that's down in 82-degree water at 40 feet, who cares how much air's left after that? It's all good.
Yeah, you're going to change your tank anyways.
Yeah, people say, I mean, it always used to be, I mean, I know there's some people, Dennis, who has to go as deep as he possibly can and get an entire, burn that tank down as far as he possibly can. Most of the dives I'm coming up with 1,300, 1,400, 1,500 PSI. That's good. And a great dive. I'll go down again, I'll fill the tank up and go again. It's not a problem whatsoever. Yeah, don't get hooked up on it and overwhelmed by it.
I watched a young diver one time out of Gilboa spend about 20 minutes on the surface trying to get underwater. He burned through a whole tank.
Oh, jeez.
Trying to get underwater. His weighting was fine. Everything was fine. You know what he didn't do? He never got vertical. So he never got all the air dumped out of his BC. And I watched him for 20 minutes try to do that. I tried to yell out to him, but he was too tunnel vision at that point.
And that's something you'll see, and it's sometimes we're bad for that. Like the students will look at us, I'll get 3 foot under the water and go horizontal, and then because it's an easier float back down, and perhaps we shouldn't. Perhaps we should go down vertical so the students see us going down vertical, so they're copying us on the way down, rather than the way we do it. So I'm just going to float down nice and slow, face first, so I can see what I'm landing in.
And a lot of that's getting familiar with your gear too. 'Cause, I mean, we might have different dump valves that we're using.
Yeah.
Where I mean, some people go down head first, some people go down feet first, some people go horizontal, vertical. But the biggest thing is making sure that you get the air out of your BC to start that.
Yeah, that's just practical. You say I only ever use the inflate to inflate. I never dump out this. I always dump out the rear on mine.
Yeah, it's the same thing with
Always
air.
dump
I'll
out the
get
rear.
head
Yeah.
down
I even
and just
put
pull
head
the
down,
core,
head down a
because
little
all
bit,
the air
just a
goes
little
to the
bit.
back a lot
Yeah,
easier,
dump
so.
out, yeah.
When I start my descent, I'll dump the air from the top.
Right, from on the descent, yeah.
On the,
Yeah. Oh, on the back, rather than
Yeah.
holding the hose up, yeah.
yeah,
I mean, that's sometimes.
and then I go vertical.
But sometimes you see it as well. You see some of the students trying to, they're nice and trim because we're teaching them. You got to stay trim and everything, super trim and all. And they're trying to dump air and they're going like this. They're going, doesn't matter what you do with that hose. The air pocket's over here. It's nowhere near where the hose is. You go and say, just turn a little bit and they'll hold it up in the air or dump out.
Yeah.
Controlling your buoyancy with your lungs
Mhm.
instead of adding and removing air does reduce it considerably.
And that takes practice and experience. Like you know that I'm coming here, I need to stop in 4 feet. I go, I know I'm going to slow down, and I'm going to stop exactly where I want to stop perfectly.
That
It's just
also,
experience.
that also
Yeah.
is a little bit of a taboo subject too, because it's always stress, breathe normally, breathe
Yeah.
normally, breathe normally. So it's like, how can I adjust my buoyancy with my breathing if I have to breathe normally? Well, you know, you can.
Right.
You just have to understand when it's
Yeah.
appropriate to do that, and when it's not.
Exactly, and that's what you learn as you go, as you get more advanced. You're like, you know, I can hold my breath for 10 seconds because I know I'm not going to change my in the water.
Yeah.
Just to bring myself up to 3 feet, I'm going to breathe out. It's more for the people that go like that and go that way, really, really
It
fast.
reminds me of learning how to drive a clutch. That's what it reminds me of. You can't express it in an education form. It has to be something that you have a feel for. Like, you can know all of the theory and all of the processes involved in accelerating a vehicle forward with a clutch, but it requires a feel. You have to learn the muscle memory in order to be able to accomplish the task. And that's the same thing with the breathing part of it. It's what it reminds me of.
And like with different regulators and different BCs, there's different clutches.
Yeah,
There's at
exactly.
least
Yeah,
different points.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, you can still hold your breath with just letting just a little bit of air out of your mouth, just a dribble, you know, and you're controlling your
You're not
buoyancy.
necessarily holding
your
breath.
breath. You're not.
Everything that you do,
You're
you can
letting
do
a
with
little bit out.
slowing the rate of your breath in and out.
I remember a dive that I did down in Panama City, and my thought process was real simple. Now, I'm one of the few divers that actually dives dry in Florida too, but I dive dry everywhere. You guys that have dove with me know this. But plan was real simple. I was going to jump out of the boat. I was going to get down the bottom, kneel on the bottom, wait for my students to show up. It's sand bottom, I'm not going to kick anything up. So it all worked real great until I looked down right below me, about 3 feet below me, and I saw the bed of urchins everywhere.
Oh, no.
All right, in a dry suit, they don't mix very well. So we had a very, very deep breath and a very, very rapid inflation, just to slow down enough so that we could achieve trim before we got there. No holes reported in the BC or in the dry suit. No holes. I actually worked on a regulator one time that actually had 2 sea urchin spines in the diaphragm. I'm wondering, boy, that could have been painful.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, that went south quick.
Yeah.
That's it. You see a lot of. It's confidence that you dive in that. If I just do this, I'm going to come up 2 feet, rather than thinking, oh, I'm not moving. I need to come up 2 feet. I need to put air on my BC. No, that's the wrong idea. You don't need to put. You're not. Don't. The BC is just to counteract the weight that you're overweighted. It's not to control your height in the water column. And that's one of the hardest things to push through to people. It's like, no, that's not what it's there for.
I see a lot of people too. They're doing their adding air to the BC or taking a breath. You gotta wait a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, oh no,
It's not
I'm not
instantaneous.
going up instantaneously. Then they add more air to the BC, and all of a sudden, then I went up too much. Now they're dumping, and they're doing this, and
You know what a
you
great,
gotta wait
you know
a
what a
little
great
bit.
thing to try is, and I do this in my classes, but it's a good thing to do on your own too, that exemplifies that point is orally inflate your BC. Take that breath and blow it into your BC. Your buoyancy doesn't change at all.
Nope.
All you've done is transfer your breath from your lungs to your BC. It doesn't change until you take that next breath.
Yep.
And one of the most difficult things that I ever found, and interesting at the same time, was when I test dove a rebreather. All right, and
Oh yeah,
that
it
little-
works opposite.
that
It works
little
the opposite.
micro buoyancy control that you have, where you take a little bit of a deeper breath or exhale a little bit more, doesn't work with a rebreather.
No, because you exhale, you go up. You inhale, you go down, because the counter lungs on the back inflate and deflate and effectively go.
Yeah.
Another thing is, it's also to do with, like, it's also a lot easier to maintain your height in the water column if you are moving. If you're moving slightly,
Absolutely.
doesn't have to be much, then it's really, really easy, because you're also pushing against the force and doing a bit of force as well. Until you get the practice in and just can do it without any movement at all.
Yeah, you want to try something to master your own buoyancy. In murky water, try to hold position standing still.
Yeah, I'm learning that. Yeah.
Almost,
Here.
almost impossible.
It's-
And what you'll learn, Brian, is you begin to feel it on your ears.
Mhm.
So
That's what I
turn
do,
around
the
and I go,
pressure.
Oh, it's a little bit more difficult on the way up, but on the way down, I go, oh, I've just gone down 2 or 3 feet,
Mhm.
because I can feel that extra little bit of pressure.
You
on
also
the
can
ears.
hear even the sound
Mhm.
as you can get closer to the surface. I mean, I can't describe it, but you can hear the sound, and you know you're coming to the surface or down. So yeah,
It's
you hear it,
crackly.
you can feel it.
It's crackly. Like when you get to start coming to the surface, you like kind of crackles in your ears.
Yeah, I'm like a crackle
Try to
more.
keep my perfect.
Like something up.
I know what you're talking
perfect buoyancy in Krusty's the last time me and Aaron went because Viz was terrible. So I just like stopped and I was like, can I do this? And I was going up and down a couple feet, but it wasn't terrible.
And that's the other thing with the computers. The computers are instant with your depth. They're not when they tell you what your sack rate is.
No.
The sack rate is normally the average over the last 2 minutes. So at the beginning of the dive, your sack rate will look horrible.
See, I don't even have my sack rate on my main screen because I don't want to look at it.
The one you want is GTR.
Yeah.
Because GTR is actually, it
Yeah.
reduces your stress level. Because if you know you're 20 minutes into the dive and your computer's telling you you've got 25 minutes of air left till you hit 700, that's another stress reducer.
Yeah.
You're not
I
thinking,
didn't think to throw that on
I'm not going to run out
Yeah.
there because I know I've got enough. And that's the one. And then what you can actually do is if you get a little bit close, and the same as you can do with NDL, when you start getting close to NDL, just come up 10 feet or so, 5 or 10 feet, and just watch that number just creep up a little bit. And you go, oh great, now I've got another 3 or 4 minutes. I'm good now. I can make the 50-minute dive, no problem at all.
There was something